Good evening, everyone. Lovely to see you all. And isn't that a beautiful photograph? Alan, have you been taking these? Yes? Okay. Okay. Sorry. I'm Adrian and I've no mask on now. Beautiful photographs. So our words are going to appear in the front of spectacular autumn colours. So thank you for that. This evening, I haven't been out the doors. It's still drizzling a wee bit. Is it okay? Are we just a wee bit? So we'll see what that's like at the end. Sure, we'll see if we can get the fire lit. And we do have some marshmallows and some spiky things, if that's possible to do that outside tonight. And biscuits. And chocolate. Right. We've got a bit of praying to do this evening to get biscuits and chocolates. But brilliant. Thank you, Ruben. And I love your castle. That looks great fun. So, right, we're going to, this evening we're thinking about another psalm. So we're going to have a couple of songs just to kind of focus on the Lord being with us. And then I want to share a little bit from Psalm 13. And then we go into a slightly longer period of worship just to allow us to come close to God in that and see what He's doing in our hearts and minds this evening. So I'm going to hand, Rachel's going to give us one or two little things that we can use during our worship.
Brilliant. So those who've been before, we're doing some Makaton signing along with our singing, and some key words this week would include difficulty or trial. You take your dominant thumb and you put it into your palm, and it's like you can't do something, you can't get past something, like you're up against something really difficult. And then fear, the sign for pain is this. So if you had a headache, you do this. Tummy ache, you do this. For fear, you have pain in your heart. Okay. But then there's faith. So take a thumb up, and then down there's faith. I have faith. Actually, it goes flat. I have faith in God. And glory. This is a fun one. Glory. So anything to do with God's glory. You do like a crown like this.
Lighthouse?
So,
No.
do you know what? For lighthouse, I have issues with metaphors, okay, for some of my friends that don't understand metaphors. So for lighthouse, you could do light and home, or you could just do God.
You could spin around. No,
that's not
do that.
Makaton, that's just made up.
Oh. Sorry, Rachel.
That's interpretive dance, we don't do that. We're Anglicans.
Okay, let's just pray. Get us. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, Ruth.
Okay, let's stand together and pray. And as Adrian says, we'll just do a couple of songs at the start, so feel free to sit at any point, but we'll just stand together to pray. God, we just thank you for your goodness to us and your faithfulness to us. We thank you that you're in this place and that you're in each one of us. And we just pray right now for more of your presence. That you would still our hearts and our minds. That we would receive more of what you have for us.
Hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When He shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord. Through the storm, He is Lord. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to only you. Give life, you are love, you bring light to the dark. breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to only all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, and these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to only. Amen. Who wants to take your seat?
So I should have welcomed people who are watching us on screens, either tonight or at some point in the future. You're very welcome as well. And this week in Belvoir at all our services, so all of this week, and on the phone line in the early part of the week as well, our theme is always the same for the whole week. So whichever service you come to, if you're watching online, you get some idea of the same thing. So this week's theme is resilience. And this morning it was Stu spoke to us from the second half of Philippians chapter 1. I'd like to read to you from Psalm 13 tonight. It's just 6 verses, so I'll read it all. Read it all. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer me, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. So, Rachel, that's where I wanted the word but. What was the sign for but? Because it's the key word in this. But. Okay, very good. Thank you. This psalm, the title of it here includes a Psalm of David. And therefore, this is somewhere located within the life of the person that we knew as the shepherd boy who then became king. And it starts off with these four little, the first two verses. In fact, the whole psalm breaks down into three little stanzas, I suppose, of 2 verses each. But the first one has 4 questions in it. And the first question is, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? And some other translations, it's, will you not remember me? And that word remember is very important because, do you know the wee phrase that you might pick up? I don't know, I don't think I've ever said it like this. But you know when somebody, you've heard a rich relative is writing their last will and testament, and you say to them, now make sure and remember me. It means you want something from them, doesn't it? It's not really that you want them to write in it, oh, I remember my nephew Adrian. Right? That's no good. You want to say, oh, I leave, to Adrian. It's remembering in the Bible has a sense of doing something for somebody. So, Joseph was able to say that God remembered him in prison. 2 of the disciples said to Jesus, will you remember us when you come into your kingdom? And they didn't mean, will you remember our names? They meant, Jesus, will you give us position, power, finance, whatever it is you might have to give away? And this first line from David is, Lord, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? Seems to indicate that David feels like he is deficient in some way, or something's being held back from him, that God isn't giving to him what he needs. There's that sense of, I'd like to suggest that to you, is that's the first part of this psalm, is David feeling the pain of something physical, like having been left out or left behind or not having provided for him. The second question, he says, how long will you hide your face from me? Now, without going into the details of this, I'm pretty sure I saw one of you, not somebody here in this room, okay, so absolutely no guilt attached, but that one of our Beaver family spotted me in Tesco one day, and that we walked around that shop and I never saw them again, which makes me think they hid behind the butter and hid behind the milk and hid behind all sorts of things not to have to talk to me over and over and over. And I could understand that. And I'm not complaining about that at all. It's just the way and there's a wee bit of, when somebody's avoiding you, you start to wonder. And it's this sort of feeling with this, how long will you hide your face from me? Imagine David feeling this before God. Are you avoiding me? Am I a nuisance to you in some way? Is there something about me that you don't want to be around with me? Then he goes on to his third question. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? This is now beginning to affect how he's feeling about himself and feeling about life. That I'm beginning to struggle deep inside of my being. And then the fourth question is, how long will my enemy triumph over me? And in David's life, there are at least 2 occasions when this could have been a real prayer. Because there was that time when he wasn't king yet, but he was being pursued by Saul. And his life was in danger. He could have been killed. There was another time when his own son, Absalom, led a rebellion against him and tried to have him put off the throne and tried to end his life. So there were real moments in David's life and spells of time, not just moments, when this could have been a real prayer. How long will my enemy triumph over me? Now, I think those are genuine, and that's the wonderful thing about the psalm writers and David in this instance, is that they just pour it out like it is. There's no trying to turn it into something wonderfully faithful and religious. It's just, how long will you forget me forever? Are you going to go on ignoring me? This is eating into my very soul, and yet you're still not here. And what about all these people who are ranged against me? Are you going to do anything? Now, In this first stanza, I think David's physical posture would be one of lying on his face on the ground. I'm sure you've all seen TV serials about police or those sorts of things. If you want to immobilize someone or put them at their most vulnerable, you put them on their face on the ground. Because they can't see you, they can't see where you are, they can't see if you're close, they can't see if you're far, they can't see if you're about to drop something on them or hurt them in some way. They're completely beyond doing anything for themselves. And I don't know if you've ever reached that point in your life where you find yourself lying face down on the ground because it's like all hope is gone. Anything I can do for myself has gone. And I think that was David's starting point. And I also don't think this psalm was written in a coffee break or written one evening or written on a weekend break away. I think this has been put together perhaps over months, perhaps over years. He has been wrestling with these thoughts, maybe scribbling them. I don't know what sort of diaries they kept or whatever, but scribbling them, and eventually wants to put this down as representing a period of his life, these questions. This isn't a moment or a weekend. This could be a big stretch of his life. And I think for parts of that, he must have been lying face down, weeping, miserable, without hope, vulnerable, and not knowing how to go on. I don't know what sort of a gap or what's happened, but I imagine that the next stanza, verses 3 and 4, somehow or other David wrestles himself from lying face down on the ground to a kneeling position, because something is a wee bit different with the next two verses. He changes from this, how long? Have you forgotten me? You're ignoring me. Where are you? To look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him. And my foes will rejoice when I fall. But there's something of kneeling in this. It's not all alone, face down on the ground, with everything gone. There's something turning inside of him that's starting to look to the God that he knows, or the God that he has known, or the God that he hopes to know again. And it's, look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. Do you ever have that wee moment when we'll do it later on, when you've got the log burner going or the barbecue going, I mean, proper one with coals and all in it, and it's nearly gone, it's nearly out, there's just the slightest glow, and you're scared to poke it in case the last wee poke that puts the whole thing out, and you're just hoping, gently putting little bits of things back in it, hoping that it might light again, hoping that we might get another burger out of this, or whatever it is that we're looking for. Can I tell a wee story from our house in Wanstead? You've probably forgotten this wee story, but let me tell it anyway. We were having a Friday night prayer meeting in our house one night, and I know that we hadn't had the fire lit since the weekend before. But as we prayed that night, the fire started to glow and then burst into flames, and it was just ashes. And in the Bible, it talks that when God's Spirit is moving and wanting to move, that he sometimes sends little signs, sometimes great big signs, in the New Testament it's called signs and wonders. And sometimes there's a little sign of something. And I don't know quite what that was that night, except that whatever it was we were praying for, a group of us young adults, that there was a sign from God that I'm blessing this, whatever it is. Now, I haven't got a life full of signs or anything, but that was certainly one of them. And it inspired us and encouraged us no end that God would want to bring the beginnings of light and fire, back into something that looks as if it's dead and gone. I think that's what David is beginning to pray for here. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. You see that lying prostrate? Yes, okay. Got to get the word right, haven't you? That lying prostrate on the ground in desperation and vulnerability. The only difference between that and death is they haven't drawn the white line around you yet. I had a friend that worked in the police service, and that was part of his job, was to put the white line on the ground round somebody who had died. And I think that's what David has reached at this point, is that if God doesn't begin to do something in me, the spirit, the life of the Spirit in my heart and soul is really going to go out. It's going to go out. So he asks God to bring light back into his eyes, as if the eyes are the symbol of life beginning again. So he's moved from lying to kneeling. Then we'll come to but. And this is what changes our lives. But. And I imagine David somehow slowly gets to his feet. He's been face down. He's been on his knees. But. And this is the step of huge courage and of huge commitment. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Now, but means that David is going to step into this before it has happened. Because praise is easy when everything's good. Praise is easy when it's all pouring our direction. And there's no need for a but. But there is a need for a but when everything's difficult. And we decide somewhere inside of me, the glimmer of God's Spirit tells me that God is still good. God has been good to me, as David says in that last line. And David has lots of memories, lots of experience of God having been good to him. And somehow, whether that was the beginning of the answer to prayer of giving light to my eyes, something is just beginning to stir inside again, and he's able to make that decision. But I trust in your unfailing love. Now, I think in our lives, as we go through life, we need to learn to do this. It isn't something that comes easy, and it's like we have to learn the lessons of faith from early in our Christian lives, so that we have experience of them, so that we're ready for the next thing. Do you remember? I mean, if Jesus had not had the 40 days in the wilderness, wrestling with Satan, wrestling with the temptations, wrestling with the possibilities of his future and what this ministry was going to be like, because this was right after his baptism, he would not have been ready for Gethsemane. Right? He needed the 40 days in the wilderness. He needed to be caught out in the storm in the lake. He needed to feel the ferocity of his opponents and everything else, because he was growing and learning and realizing that God was with him and putting it to the test and finding God to be faithful, so that we ended up with the greatest test of all. He was able to remain firm. So I think God is inviting us, in whatever we're in, whatever the condition of life is for us, whether maybe even this evening, and as we worship in this next wee section, I want us to, could we be as honest before God as David is honest with the whole of the world in putting this down on paper? That if this is a face down on the floor moment, you can do that. You don't have to do that, but you can do that internally. This is I'm done. Yeah? I barely know how to go on. Or maybe as we worship, you feel you want to get to your knees. And again, you can do that physically or just do it internally, of saying, Lord, would you just begin to light the light again in me? Or maybe at some point during the worship we will sense, God has been good to me, even no matter what I'm facing. And maybe I just could open a wee hand as we join in these songs, say, Lord, thank you. I trust you. I know you're hanging on to me, even when I find it difficult to hang on to you. There might be a wee but moment in our worship tonight. But you're not to feel any guilt at all if you're not reaching that point. If it's still knees or still face down. This is still a valid experience of what it means to be a follower of God in our Bibles. But let's allow, you happy to take us on with the worship songs? And feel free to sit, stand, relax in whatever way you feel you can use these songs as, let's try to go beyond music and maybe even beyond words and begin to sense that God, the Holy Spirit, moving among us and wanting to minister into our hearts and our souls, our minds, and in whatever of these three bits of this are where we're at the minute. Let's be honest with Him and be there. Lord, Holy Spirit, would you come and move in this building? You've gathered us in here. Our lives are open to you. Our hearts are open. We invite you to come and minister into us. We realize there's no point in hiding from you, so we come to you just as we are.
It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. In my wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled sea. In the silence you won't let go, and in my questions your truth will hold. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, my shore, safe to shore. I won't fear what tomorrow brings. With each morning I'll rise and sing, 'cause my God's love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled sea. Darkness, I'll follow you, oh, my lighthouse, and I will trust the promise. You carry me safe to shore, safe to shore. Safe to shore, safe to shore. Far before us, you're the brightest. You lead us through the storm. Before us, you're the brightest. You lead us through the storms. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I'll follow you. My lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You carry me safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore. Your faithfulness, oh God my Father, oh God my friend, your love it never fades, and so I'll love you until the end. When shadows fall, you never change. From age to age, you never change. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Through the years, you've always been there. And great is your love for us, your love for us. Through the years, you'll always be there. place. Your presence like a fire, and hope for tomorrow, strength for today. When shadows fall, you never change. From age to age, you never change. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Through the years, you've always been there. And great is your love for us, your love for us. Through the years, you'll always be there. We will stand upon your promises. We're strong because our hope is in you. We will run, we will run, we will run. We belong, we belong, we belong to you. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Through the years, you've always been there. And great is your love for us, your love for us. Through the years, you'll always be there. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Through the years, you've always been there. And great is your love for us, your love for us. Through the years, you'll always be there. Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drank from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. For you are good, good. Oh, 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 let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. For you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, yes, you are good, good. Oh, never gonna let me down. You're 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 never gonna let me down. But you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, yes, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are so good. You are so good. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on.
One of the possible moments in David's life when he may have written that psalm, one of the bits of his life that sort of fits with the psalm, was a situation where David's third son Absalom had murdered David's first son Amnon. And we're told in 2 Samuel sort of 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, that sort of part of the Bible, that it took 5 years for David to invite his son Absalom to come back to the palace. 5 years of living with the horror of one of his sons killing one of the other ones. And when he invited Absalom back to the palace, Absalom came back, but they didn't come back to be reconciled. He came back because Absalom was organizing a rebellion to take his father off the throne. And a war then breaks out between them. And during that war, David knows that he's going to win, and he orders his generals to make sure if they ever catch up with Absalom to treat him gently and keep him alive. And they killed him. And we read in 2 Samuel 19, at the end of 18, the king was shaken. He went up to the room over the gateway and wept. He's face down again. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom." And then he says something incredibly profound that over 1,000 years later will start to become a reality. "If only I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." And one day there will be one who will be called Son of David. who will give his life in place of those who are in rebellion against the king. And so really just what I wanted to finish with was that sometimes our suffering and our pain and our sense of desolation maybe and our search for God, our reaching out, our trying to butt and get up again, and the struggle that is, will actually be contributing to the redemption story. That we're joining in the sufferings and the desolation of Christ. And there may be something that is happening in our lives that will one day help with the redemption and the salvation and the healing of others. So we're not just in a world where we're trying to avoid pain all the time, but we're in a world where actually sensing it, feeling it, being part of it, may be part of the salvation of our world as well. So Lord, tonight, if it does feel really difficult for us, we thank you that you know exactly what that was like, and that you walk with us in this and through this. And if there's no easy solutions out of it, we just want to thank you that you will never have abandoned us, even if at times it feels like that to us. We thank you that you're holding on to us much closer and tighter than we could ever hold on to you. Could we stand together?